Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's well. It is Wednesday, hump day. Um, we are in the Book of Ruth in the Old Testament. We're in chapter 2. It's only 4 chapters, short book, love story in the time of Judges. So amidst all the chaos we've witnessed over the last 5 weeks while we were in the Book of Judges, and some of the heinous things. Good morning, Carrie. We see within this time frame the love story of Ruth unfolding. Morning, Michelle. And so the setup was, yesterday was Ruth, was again the beginning of Ruth. And so we see a family in Israel, an Israelite family, again in the time of Judges. A famine breaks out, and so they flee Israel for the land of Moab. Now, this is something God has said never to do. And we talked about the reason that there was a famine, the time of Judges, people are doing, there is no king, so people are following their own hearts. Well, Elimelech, and I don't say that correct, by the way, I was listening to it again last night. I have no gift for languages. He, and his own will, took his family to Moab. And so his sons married Moab daughters, all right, non-Israelites. All of this is in violation of God's command. Morning, Manny. And so we're going to watch some stuff unfold, but we're going to watch the redemptive power of God's love in our lives. We're going to watch Naomi change, and we're going to watch Ruth change. So amidst all this, she decides to go back home to Israel, which we ended yesterday. All right. And so now Naomi and Ruth, her Moabite daughter-in-law, who has loved her like a mother, and Ruth loves her like a daughter, staying with her, are now in Israel. And so what do? No means to make money. And so this is where we kind of find ourselves today. Right? Now, the other thing is, I don't like the way the NIV starts this chapter. And so I'm going to read from King James because it's such a powerful line. And so today we're going to be introduced to Boaz. All right. And so he's the third character of importance in the Book of Ruth. And so we are again in the Book of Ruth, chapter 2, verse 1. And Naomi had a kinsman. And this isn't just the way you describe a family member. This is actually a legal term. Kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, and in some versions it says valor, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. All right. And so we see this fellow Boaz introduced today, a great guy. And so Boaz is wealthy. Boaz didn't flee Israel. He's of the same clan as Naomi's husband and Naomi. And so this is all going to unfold today, why that's important and the timing of it all. And the other thing to note, and I'll say this every day, gig me if I forget, God is not really discussed in the Book of Ruth, but he's everywhere in it. And that's what's, I think, so powerful about this book, is that we watch God in these lives guiding, and there's no coincidences, there's no luck. It's all God. All right. So this is where we start. Now, and Ruth, the Moabite, said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind everyone, and those in whose eyes I find favor." Now, what the world today forgets, and we covered this at length in Leviticus, God actually is the God of justice. And we have a social justice system built into Levitical law. And so this is what Ruth is talking about. And so if we go back to really quick, Leviticus 19, 9, 10, when you reap the harvest, this is God telling his people how to farm. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. I'll talk about gleanings in a second. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. All right. So when you pick a harvest, morning, Stella, when you pick a harvest, part of Levitical law, God's law, is to leave things behind. Don't go back and glean. Glean is to go back a second time and pick up the things that fell. All right. And so as an example, when I was a kid, my grandfather farmed, I don't know, a couple thousand acres in Delaware when I was a kid. And he used to give us a nickel for every corn cob, full corn cob we would find after they harvested corn. And so we would go out in the fields with a bushel basket, 4 or 5 years old, because it was always cool to end up with like 35 cents. And we'd walk for hours, acres, 35 cents. A lot of money back in the 70s. And so that's gleaning. All right. And so the Israelites are told to do that. Now, what's the other piece to this, and we're going to see this with Ruth in a second, this also gives the people, the needy, dignity. Because you're not just giving them something, they got to work for it. They have to go into the field and do this. There's dignity in work. And so God knows this. All of this is unfolding in the background. This is the culture that Ruth is going to. So she, again, tells her mom, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain. They need food. All right. Although ultimately they're from this, they return to a place they're from, Bethlehem. They hadn't been there in 10 years. There's no infrastructure for them, no real relationships. And so it's like, okay, what do we do? How do we eat? Now, Naomi said to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was the clan of Elimelech. Just then, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you, he tells to all the people. And the Lord bless you, they answered. So think about this. On the day that Ruth goes into the field to glean, she picks a field, doesn't know anybody. She just picks a field at random or conviction, however it was that she ends up in this field. At the exact same time, a couple hours later, the exact same day that Boaz, the owner of the field, comes out to see what's going on with his people. And he's just such a great leader. He engages everybody, and he, the Lord be with you. And they all respond, and with you as well. He has a relationship with all his people. He's a good leader. And so he's standing there in his field. Ruth and Boaz come together on the same day in the same field, in a field. Boaz asked the overseer of the harvesters, they're standing there, they've greeted everybody goes back to work, and he's standing there with the overseer. And Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, who does that young woman belong to? His eye catches Ruth. And the overseer replied, she's the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came in the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So what's fascinating here is Ruth didn't just show up and start gleaning, as is her right under Levitical law, but she was humble and came to the overseer and, would you mind if I glean behind your harvesters? She asked for permission. That's her heart. And the overseer, he sees this. Again, Boaz is a good leader. Good leaders pick good people. And so we see here, he's inspecting Ruth and her work. So Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. Now, my daughter is just a term they use. It's not weird for us. It's a cultural thing back then. And so basically he engages her. I can only imagine him sitting there stroking his beard, and he's talking to the overseer. He's like, okay, I'm going to go talk to her. And so he goes over to her and says, hey, listen, don't go anywhere else. Stay here. This is Boaz, the owner of the field, inviting her to stay there. And so this is an amazing, again, no coincidences. This is God at work. At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? A foreigner. And so, again, think about two people in a church, in a bar, in a mall, wherever, and that the eye contact is had and the energy, the spark happens, the attraction. All right. Eros starts with, it always starts with Eros, and God willing, it ends in agape. And, and so there she senses this. No way that she can't. God's admits this. And so she's humble, drops to the ground. Why do you favor your foreign servant? Boaz replied, I've been told all about you, all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with the people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Boaz is a wealthy man. There's a lot of account that he was a military man because of his bearing, but he's also a spiritual, faithful man. And he has heard about her. Bethlehem's not big. Naomi's returned kind of in tragedy and in defeat, candidly, homeless, widowed, with a Moabite daughter-in-law. And so everybody's talked about it in the town, but Boaz has heard about it. And he's been impressed by the fact that Ruth's loyalty was so much to Naomi that she helped her come home, and she's decided to stay and to make Boaz's God her God. May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord, she said. You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant. Though I do not have the standing of one of your servants, I'm not one of yours, and you're treating me as one. And she's thankful to him. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine bitter. Again, the spark. No one else has been invited. He's probably sitting amongst the men culturally. And so, Ruth, come on over here. Sit with me. Talk to me. And so the other thing is we forget, and let me see if I can find my notes on that. When he allowed her to go into the field, you got to remember, she's working side by side for hours with other Israelites. She's in the gleaning. So these are probably not the popular people, but there is a companionship in this. So she's beginning to get to know the people. There's also a protection. Stay here, you won't get hurt. And above all this, there's a refreshment as she just connects to people. They've been on the road for a long time. This is the day after coming into Bethlehem. Got to eat. And so Boaz has offered all this. Now lunchtime is here, and he's asking her to come sit with him. Talk to me. And so when she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. He actually gives her some of the lunch. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men. Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. All right. So what happens is with the barley, it's kind of like wheat. Imagine they're skiffing it. The harvesters are cutting it. There's people coming behind them and bundling it, which is the sheaves. And then the gleaners are coming by once the sheaves are picked up and getting anything that dropped off. He's saying, listen, if she rolls into the sheaves, it's okay. It's okay. Let her gather among the sheaves. Don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up. And don't rebuke her. All right. Listen, guys, there's something special about this woman. Just treat her with respect. All right. I'm asking this. And he doesn't demand. And, this is the kind of person Boaz is. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening, dusk till dawn. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered. This is pulling the barley, the actual barley off, and it mounted to an ephah, about 30 pounds. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over. This is of the portions that Boaz actually gave her, the roasted grain, things like that, after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, where did you glean today? Where did you work? Because this is a good bounty for a day's worth of work. And it was a long day for Ruth, bent over in the heat, in the field. And so, how did this happen? Now, remember, Naomi walked into Bethlehem yesterday saying, call me Mara, a woman of misery. God is against me. 24 hours later, it's a whole different story. Where'd you get this blessing from? Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. Ruth is probably touched. Now remember, Ruth married Naomi's son, so there's a little bit of weirdness here. She's been a widow for a little bit of time now. She's probably dressed as a widow to identify as a widow. And so she's seeing Boaz. And you can only imagine the flutter of hope in her heart and the flutter of hope that's in Naomi's heart right now based on the blessing. because that's how hope starts. It starts as just a little flutter. The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz, she said. Ruth tells Naomi. And Naomi blurts out, "The Lord bless him." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead, she added. That man is our close relative, a kinsman. He is one of our guardian redeemers. All right. We're introduced in Ruth to kinsman redeemers or guardian redeemers. These are legal definitions of family members who are on the hook if in the case of like Naomi, if someone's husband dies, they're the closest redeemer to them through the bloodline is to bring them into the family. Remember, the Israelites are all about not letting any family line die out. To the point we talked about yesterday or the other day, well, we're going to talk about it actually. I haven't gotten to it. I'm thinking ahead. A Levirate marriage. And so they're called to marry in to bring the wife of the of the dead relative into their home or buy their property to restore them, redeem them. This is where we begin to get the concept of Christ as a redeemer. Amen. We see this all the way back in again in the Exodus, where God redeemed the Israelites above all other nations. And within the Israelites, God redeemed the tribe of Levi, the Levite priesthood, above all the Israelites. Jesus is going to redeem everybody that accepts him. But this is where the concept begins to meet us individually. All right. And so then Ruth the Moabite said, he even said to me, stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain. He let me stay. Normally, the gleaners are never they don't really interact. There's, again, trying to give them dignity. They're working, they're doing their own thing. By the way, this is our field, so there's probably a little bit of arrogance there. I mean, it's human nature. And so there's a separation. Not always, but usually. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed. He's our kinsman. And so Naomi begins to think this through from a law family perspective. What's going on here? So Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So a time is going to go by, a couple weeks, depending on the sizes of the field. And so what we see is an incredible, we would call coincidence today, is none, God beginning to work. Although God's not talked about here, we see Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz come together in one day, the same day. Ruth didn't work the fields and then Boaz showed up 2 weeks later at the end to thank everybody for picking his harvest for him. That's not Boaz. Boaz came out to hang out and to work with them. These are my fields. I'm coming out to hang out with my people. And amidst this, it's the same day that Ruth shows up. And she makes such an impact by being so humble, by living, and she's just accepted their God as her God. And yet she's exhibiting the best of it as a Moabite. And she attracts the eye of Boaz. And he attracts her eye. And so we're beginning to see how they're going to align. And amidst this, Naomi, the coincidence that this is our family member in Bethlehem, their kinsman, their guardian redeemer, she's beginning inside as a woman of faith. Man, the Lord is awesome. He hasn't completely turned his back on me. So no matter what our season is, we got to remember that God is at work. And most likely in our wilderness, much like Naomi and her husband Elimelech, if I got it right, they made bad decisions and didn't trust God and left the land of promise to go into the promise or into the land that is counter to promise, the Moabs. And they married their sons to Moabite women. But we got to remember, from Ruth will come Ruth is in the lineage of Jesus. Spoiler alert. Ruth, a Moabite. Just like Rahab, the prostitute, was a Canaanite in Jericho, in the line of Jesus. Jesus unites all men, irrespective of faith, nationality, all of that. And so we're going to see that unfold through this amazing woman. Her spirit is on full display. And it's attracting Boaz. It caught the attention of the overseer. And then Boaz and the overseer, good leader, picks good people. They're having a frank discussion. And, hey, who's that? What's she doing? Well, let me tell you about her. That's Ruth. She came back with Naomi. Have you heard about Naomi? What happened to her? Yeah. And that's the Ruth that helped her get home and return home and decided to pick her people over her own. Yep, that's her. Wow. What else did she do? She asked me permission to be here today. She didn't have to do that. She's the only one that did that. All the other people were here because they have the right to be here after the harvesters. But she came up and asked. And I watched her work. She worked diligently, hard. She didn't sit around and gossip. She only rested once. This is how this is unfolding. And so I just want to, again, it's an amazing story in the time of Judges. Famine. They left in, Naomi can't help but wonder, they left in famine. They come back because the Lord has begun to bless Israel again. And they end up in the field of a kinsman who didn't leave Israel, who stayed faithful and has been blessed by God for it. In this season, same season that Naomi and her husband were in, Boaz was in. Same season. Both made vastly different choices. One fled Israel for the enemy, married into the enemy. The other stayed faithful, and God brought him through the storm and blessed him. Remember that, my friends. That's the lesson in today. And he's not done blessing Boaz. He's not done blessing Naomi, because she, amidst her wandering wilderness, because we all create our own wilderness, I got to go home. The Lord is working in home. Something's changed. I got to go home. I need to seek the Lord. And she did that. And Ruth, for the first time in the 10 years she was in the family, never accepted Naomi's God. She sees Naomi relying on her God and says, man, I want that. I'm going to go with you, Naomi. I love you. I'm going to forego my people for your people, forego my gods for your God. In the midst of Naomi's reliance on God, trusting God, something struck Ruth, and she wanted that. She saw the peace that was descending upon Naomi. Amen. And so here we are, one field, one day, two people coming together. What are the odds of that? Just like your parents, just like you, if you have children. This is the way God works. Amen. All right, my friends, may the peace of the Lord, the peace that fell upon Naomi and inspired Ruth, the peace that was in Ruth that caught Boaz's eye, may that peace rest upon you and your families today. And until we meet again tomorrow morning for Ruth chapter 3, may the Lord bless you and your families with safety and good health. Amen, amen, and amen. What a love story, guys. So, all right, my friends. So we'll wrap up. We'll do tomorrow. We'll wrap up Friday. And I hope you love this as much as I do. Some people say it's a goofy story. It really isn't. This is life in the time of Judges. All right. Even amidst bad seasons, good things are occurring in your life if you just look for them. Amen. Might have to do a sermon series on this year. I'm just so inspired by Ruth. So, my brother Boaz. All right, my friends. You guys have a great day. I love you all. Have a good week, and I'll see you all tomorrow morning. Take care.